Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here today. I am joined this morning by Deputy Chief Mark Saunders, who is the officer in charge of our Specialized Operations Command, by Staff Superintendent Jim Raymer, who is in charge of our detective services, all of our investigative units, and by Superintendent Chris White. And Superintendent White is in charge of the Organized Crime Enforcement Unit and the Integrated Guns and Gangs Task Force responsible for the conduct of Project Traveler. The purpose of this afternoon's media briefing is to update the public on the results to date of Project Traveler, an investigation of the Toronto Police Service's Integrated Guns and Gangs Task Force, working in partnership with the Windsor Police Service, the Provincial Weapons Enforcement Unit, the Ontario Provincial Police, the Canadian Border Services Agency, members of the Peel Region, Halton Region, York Region, and Durham Regional Police Services, and as well police in Edmonton and the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams. In addition to the aforementioned police partners, we were ably assisted this morning by tactical officers from across Ontario in the execution of search warrants and the arrest of suspects, and I wish to take this opportunity to express my very sincere thanks to all of them for a job well done and a job done safely. Project Traveler is a very complex investigation into the alleged criminal activities of a group known as the Dixon City Bloods or the Dixon Goonies. The investigation, which began in June of 2012, centered on the trafficking of firearms and drugs and involved numerous serious crimes of violence, including murder and attempt murder. Many of the alleged crimes of this criminal organization were centered in the area of the apartment complex located on Dixon Road between Islington and Kipling, but our investigation revealed that the impact of their activities ranged far beyond that neighborhood, and they involve serious crimes of violence, gun importation, and drug trafficking across Toronto, in the surrounding regions, throughout Ontario, and in particular in Windsor, Ontario, and in the province of Alberta. I would now like to invite Deputy Chief Mark Saunders to provide you with some of the specifics about today's arrests and search warrants. Deputy Saunders.
Thank you, Chief. The alleged criminal organization that this investigation has been targeting for over a year has been identified as the Dixon Bloods. Their members are primarily responsible for attempting to control the area of Dixon Road between Kipling Avenue and Islington, or Kipling Road and Islington Avenue. This gang has been networking with associates from Windsor to Edmonton since 2006, where members have been responsible and involved in shootings, robberies, possession and trafficking of drugs and firearms. This morning at approximately 5 a.m., 42 tactical teams from 17 police agencies, including Toronto, executed approximately 39 search warrants in the jurisdictions of Toronto and Windsor. 11 of these warrants were in Windsor. I'm pleased to say that all the warrants that were executed today in Toronto were done so without any serious incident. To date, as a result of this year-long investigation that was led by the Organized Crime Enforcement Integrated Gun and Gang Task Force, the results are as it stands. Today, we've arrested 19 people in Toronto, 9 in Windsor. 43 to date have been arrested from this investigation, and the investigation is still ongoing, and we anticipate that there will be more arrests that will take place. We have seized 40 firearms. We've seized over $3 million in narcotics, including cocaine, heroin, hashish, marijuana, LSD, crystal meth, and others. And we've also seized $572,000 in cash. At this time, I'd like to personally thank all those members from the various agencies throughout the province that stepped up and assisted us in this very lengthy investigation, and also a special thanks to the members from the Organized Crime Enforcement Unit and other agencies within, or other units within our service that worked relentlessly throughout this year to reach this resolve. I'll just turn the microphone back to the Chief.
Thank you, Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, the conduct of these investigations can have a significant impact on the safety of our communities. Over the past several years, the Toronto Police Service has undertaken investigations in an effort to dismantle and disrupt the activities of criminal enterprises, often taking the form of neighborhood street gangs that can have a devastating impact on communities and on families and on those who are victims of violence and crime in our communities. And we know from our experience in dismantling these organizations, by incapacitating these violent offenders, by disrupting their networks, which supply them with guns and drugs, we can make a difference in those communities. We make a difference by incapacitating the most violent of offenders, and we make a difference by dismantling those organizations. But we also make a difference by the work that we do in those communities. And in a follow-up to the raids that were done today, particularly in the apartments located on Dixon Road, we will, for the next several days, have officers positioned in that neighborhood to answer the questions that a community has. We know how traumatic it can be when those raids take place in the dark of night, when doors are going crashing down, and when concussion flashbangs are also ignited in their neighborhoods. We know how traumatic that can be. And so we want to go into that community to reassure that community, to restore their sense of safety, to restore their sense of control, and let them know that we and the people of Toronto stand with them against those who would victimize them, those who would terrorize them in their communities. And we know many families that have lost their sons to violence, and we are endeavoring to bring justice to those people and a reassurance to all families who live in fear of losing their sons to similar violent events, that we will do everything in our power to remove those guns from our street, to dismantle those organizations that is responsible for bringing those drugs and guns into our community and for the acts of violence that have victimized so many in our community. I mentioned the importation of guns and the supply of guns. More than 70% of the crime guns that we seize in the City of Toronto come across the border. They are obtained legally or illegally in the United States, quite often through straw purchase, and they're smuggled into this country. And they are smuggled in, and they reach the streets of our community, and they are used to commit so much violence and victimize so many. The organization which we have disrupted today is alleged to have been involved in the importation of firearms across the Windsor border. Over the past several months, we have been working closely with Border Security Services and with the Windsor Police to disrupt that supply, to keep those guns out of Ontario, to apprehend and prosecute those people responsible for the importation of guns. And as you've heard today, to date, we have actually obtained 40 firearms, seized 40 firearms from this group, but more importantly, I think we've cut off that pipeline, that supply of guns, and that's going to make the City of Toronto a safer place. It is also important that these investigations be conducted to preserve our ability. It's important that we preserve our ability to prosecute the offenders. We can disrupt these individuals by conducting raids and executing search warrants in their communities, by seizing evidence from their homes, and by arresting them. But it is only through the successful prosecution of these individuals that we can really have a long-term impact in their communities. And it is for that reason that I must advise you that we are not able to disclose either the investigative methodologies that we have employed over the course of this investigation or the evidence that has been obtained. The law is very clear in this matter, and the only place for the legal disclosure of the evidence that has been obtained throughout this investigation is in a court of law. I want to assure the people of Toronto that all of the evidence collected throughout the course of this investigation has been secured, and it will be presented by the prosecuting Crown Attorney at trial. All of the evidence will come out in court where it belongs. Improper disclosure of evidence or the investigative methodologies employed would constitute a serious offense in law and could jeopardize the criminal prosecution of those who we believe are responsible for the alleged crimes. And for this reason, I will not be able to answer any question concerning the evidence that has been gathered in this case. The police must always act according to the rule of law, and we will not jeopardize this case by the improper disclosure of evidence.